Hey, left, right out. We're doing an election update. I did one last night and kind of went on a little rant. But here we are, the morning of the 9th, day after work, D-Day or whatever, for it's a supposed red wave that's supposedly crashing into the country, which went out with a whimper, in my opinion, and actually left me more concerned with society as a whole in general. I'm more concerned with the American people and where we're going. So we'll start off with Arizona because that's very near and dear to my heart. I have some ties there, and I know that state very well. And it is a very, very libertarian-esque, liberty-loving, conservative state. And what I mean by libertarian-esque, if you take certain aspects of what they believe and whatnot, they're very liberty, freedom-oriented. They tend to vote conservative. If they do vote, very family-oriented. It's a place where, like when I was growing up there, even wherever you came from in the world as an immigrant, you wanted to meld into America there, and there was a lot of intact families, a lot of cultural not cultural transition, cultural transmission between generations. It was just a very good place to grow up and a very good place to live. And then, of course, you had the war on drugs and a lot of this other stuff going on there. There is bad things that happen. But that war on drugs along the border actually made them more like pro-Second Amendment. When you go down there and like hunt and fish or whatever, it's not uncommon to see ranchers, hunters. They're not only just packing their hunting rifle, but they have AR-15, sidearm or whatever, just for their own protection. Very independent-minded people in a lot of the state. Of course, you got to axe out the Phoenix area, which has turned into a cesspool. Tucson, which used to be pretty good, and these cities are spread out, so there's different demographics, or I'm not talking about ethnic demographics when it comes to thought and mindset, because I don't even look at people that way in that state, because there's let's take a Hispanic population there that to me they're very, very conservative. And along with the white, and there's such a melding of those two, of Caucasian, wherever Northern Europeans and Southern Europeans and more traditional Mexican Americans that are down there and other groups that I don't even classify them in different trains of thought. In that state, and same in New Mexico, they tend to, but New Mexico has a little different dynamics. We can get into that a little bit more, but Arizona in particular, they're very, they think a lot of the same. Those cultural elements have actually infused with each other. It's a very interesting state if you have a history there and understand a lot of the people. But the disconcerting thing here is the push towards the left in that state as more Californians and other jackwads from other parts of the country settle into this area. Not only has it affected the culture there when it comes to the Western way of life, ranching and agricultural communities have been, pretty much uprooted, and a lot of these things were given to these out-of-state retirees or displaced whatever people from other states, and these ranches and whatnot have been chopped up. The good thing about it, I guess there's a lot of public land, which I don't necessarily agree with in principle. The amount of public, federally owned and state-owned land, or state-owned land's fine, but the federally owned land there. But what it has done is it kind of hindered some of this division. That's a whole nother subject. Let's get into the election now. We're just on 2 minutes on the deep diving in the Arizona trains of thought. But anyway, we'll look at this race right now. 60% of the vote in for Arizona. That's still counted. Who knows how long this one's going to take when you got 34% of the vote still out there. And I can't even find right now what counties have what in there. I guess, well, here we got, Pima County's 94% in. Kind of a left-leaning county. Maricopa, which arguably, even though how much I don't like Phoenix and all that, it's usually a fairly red area. They don't have any, I can't find anything on the percentages of them. Pinal County, you got Casa Grande and some other towns there. They're reporting 100% in, and in the Senate anyway. Blake Masters has carried that county, which that's a fairly big county. But Masters, we'll start with the Senate side. Masters is trailing by 5%. It doesn't look good for him, to be totally honest, unfortunately, because I actually liked that gentleman. And he was one of the liberty-minded individuals. He would have been one of the better senators going into into DC this time around. And I don't know if he's going to be able to pull it off. We'll find out. It looks like it's going to come down for him. It's going to come down to Maricopa County, and he didn't have a good showing in Pima County. And I'm going to relate this back to this. This relates to all these races. I have lost faith in the American public. I think they're like a heroin addict at this point, where they're, especially economically, that they've gone down this road of Keynesian socialist economic policies to the point where they're at the last bastion, wherever somebody gives them another hit of cash or the promise of something free, that they'll take it instead of actually taking the medicine or going through the rehab, which is, it's going to be painful now because we didn't do it before. We didn't do it in the last few decades. Take your medicine and actually build a good foundation for economic growth and for future generations. Now people are just looking out for themselves. They want that next hit. As in a heroin addict, instead of going to rehab, we just want that next hit of cash until the next, drop, and then we need another heroin hit. So people are looking at that not only through economic policy, but through a number of other things. And so the leftists are always promising that next shallow hit, and where people on the right tend to more want to take you to rehab. And not to say that they understand all the dynamics of economics. I'd argue that even some of the people I like, I think that they're supply siders, but they might not understand everything to the fullest, to the best the ability that they should. But that is where the American public is at this point. They're short-term voters. There's a great deal of voters that are not that way, but they're so overwhelmingly become that. And that you can go back to whatever the public school system and a number of other policies and dumbing down of society as a general, getting out the vote type things, to people trying to lower the voting. There's all kinds of stuff that's going on that lends itself to this. So these people are voting for Kelly for some reason, and that guy got caught kind of lying about Second Amendment issues, trying to buy an AR-15. Or if you remember a couple years ago, it seems like we're very short-sighted on some of these things. The guy's a dope. But anyway, so we'll go from there. Let's go to the governor's race, because that's more pertinent to me. That's something that maybe on the Kelly's Masters thing, at least they would have a debate. You can argue maybe at least Kelly can string some sentences together. He's got a resume. Okay, I can kind of get that. But we get into the Hobbs Lake deal. One Katie Hobbs, isn't she the Secretary of State there? She's running the election still. She didn't recuse herself as far as I know, which is kind of crazy. We didn't even get into some of the irregularities in Maricopa County, I believe, where people were turned away. They said they can vote Democrat, but they couldn't vote Republican. There's all kinds of stuff. I'm not even getting into that. But okay, we'd look at Carrie Lake and Katie Hobbs. Carrie Lake, very well spoken. Like I said, economically, she's at least supply side. She understands some basic stuff, which most Republicans do. But at the same time, there's been talk from guys that I know. They're like, hey, they know her. They're like, hey, if we can just link her up with some like Ron Polish type character, maybe we can get a good advisor in there for her on the economic side. But everything else, she's pretty damn solid on, especially what we need right now. And right now, she's closed the gap, right? So she's 49, almost 50%. We're almost at a dead heat here, with 66 reporting in. Of course, the usual suspects. Now, this seems to be something, and it baffles me that Pima County is so overwhelmingly liberal. It's unbelievable, because it's a very conservative area. I know Pima County very well, but there's a lot of these old retirees that live there now, and they are old school Democrats that still, and I mean old school, like they're some of them are racist. They still refer to certain ethnicities by certain names, but they're hell bent on their benefits and their government benefits. They're stuck on that, and they don't even look into the issues very much. They might watch CNN or whatever or the local news outlets who parrot talking points from these various outlets, but then they just vote D no matter what. If it's D, just vote D. And there's a lot of those old people down there. And I heard some other commentator, I can't recall, but they're talking about how old people, maybe it was Megan Kelly or something. That's why I don't listen to her. Old people tend to vote overwhelmingly Republican. Well, maybe in certain areas, but in other areas, when it comes to like this, Pima County, they don't. There's a huge contingent of old people that vote Democrat because they're so heavily bought off by government benefits. And who pays those? Well, it's the younger people. And in that case down there, I would argue that the mid-20s family, mid-20s, 30s, and 40s intact families that are down there are more conservative oriented. And it's unbelievable just how overwhelmingly Hobbs is like winning Pima County by like 50,000 votes. Maricopa County, on the other hand, like I said, it's, you got Phoenix in there. You got all those attached metropolitan areas as well as there, like Mesa and in Glendale and Scottsdale and all that. It's actually fair. I mean, what is it? She's down, almost 33,000 votes or whatever it is right now. Lake is, but that's actually a decent showing for that area. And I would suspect that to be tightened up as we find out how much has been reported there. We find out some of these, because some of this stuff is going to be hand counted because of the weirdness going on in some of the voting machines. But it seems odd. It just always baffles me that certain states, that there's a number of people. Okay, well, here's the other thing about this Lake Hobbs thing. Hobbs is like the only candidate ever to not go into a debate. And usually she's pulled like what Fetterman should have done in Pennsylvania. And but it doesn't matter. Like I said, there's just a number of brainwashed people that will vote D no matter what. And I'm not saying that there's those R side of things, because there are people that will just vote R. They tend to be a little bit more up to date on some of the issues, or at least some of the nuance, but they still just will vote R no matter what, because it's a team dynamic where they think if they do anything else, or they vote for somebody that they're told that can't win, but even though they think it's the best person, they think it's ways to vote. That's a whole nother topic. So I'm not like just bashing these D's, but the D's are the people that vote D down there. A lot of them will just vote D no matter what. And there is a little bit of a split here, and you can see that on the right side, because when we're looking at this race comparatively from the Senate and the governor's race, you can see that disparity of people that are willing to vote split tickets from the Masters and Lake side of things. You're talking about close to almost 60,000 votes that obviously voted Lake and maybe not Masters. But at the same time, you look at the Hobbs-Kelly numbers, and you're looking at maybe 20,000 people that are willing to split ticket. So that's what I'm talking about. We haven't even got all the votes in. I think that will play out that same way, where you'll have people that voted for Kelly voted for Hobbs. They just vote straight D ticket. Where people that voted for Masters and Lake, maybe not so much. But you would still see that. You'd hope that when you're actually going through the candidates, who's the best candidate, I would actually argue that for the Senate, that Masters probably outtakes Lake, but Lake's probably a better speaker. When it comes to candidacy and actually being conservative values, I know that I just went down a whole different rabbit hole that seems, I don't know if I even understand what I'm saying, but there's a lot of nuance here to the populace in Arizona. Maricopa County and Pima County, too, are two different thinking people. I'll just tell you that way. When I know the people in Tucson used to not think very fondly of people from Phoenix, and vice versa. There's like a contingency there, and some of it had to do with changing cultural, schematics or just like cultural divergence between the two areas. Granted, there's always been a lot of conservative type people, and some of it comes from the harshness of the environment, especially up by Maricopa County. When you get outside the city, the conservative nature of those people that relate to people from Pima County. But then you have a totally different dynamic when you get northern part of the state, where you have and the very eastern part and northern part, where you have a huge like a more traditional Native American communities. There are some along the border, but when you get into the Navajos, are very independent minded people. Same with the San Carlos White Mountain Apache reservation, but Navajo in general too are very, a lot of Native American reservations are very liberal. for some reason, even though they too, Native Americans are very conservative people. We can get into that if we ever do a New Mexico one of these. But you'll see a divergence in the Navajo Nation where there is some actual right-leaning people, especially because military service in that community is looked upon as a very honorable thing. And typically, if you're in the military, you vote conservative. Once you get experience off the reservation, you start seeing the world in a whole nother light. You get experience and particularly the Navajo Nation, you have a huge contingent of people that go into the Marine Corps, which is very conservative or liberty-minded. You see a lot of libertarians come out of the Marine Corps, a lot of very conservative people coming from that train of service, and that has to do with like the history of the Navajo code talkers and that reverence for that, which is an awesome thing. It's pretty cool to see how the Navajo Nation embrace that, kind of warrior ethos that the Marine Corps has taken it and embrace that culture, their contribution to the World War II effort. But you see some interesting stuff there in relation to what you traditionally see on another Native American reservation when it comes to voting. That doesn't mean that they're not going to be still a blue area, but you just see a lot more of the conservative values and the possibility for a conservative to actually win those things. And you can see it in some of the numbers when you look into like Coconino County, which also encompasses I believe partially Flagstaff, which that area is going to be more conservative. Typically there's a lot of big ranching operations, what's left of Arizona are still up there, hunters and outdoorsmen and stuff. So but Navajo County, you're looking at a pretty tight race between Hobbs and Lake there. Same with Masters and Kelly, considering that, like I said, Native American reservations are typically very liberal. So then we get up into the western part of the state, which this is an interesting diamond. These are to me tend to be, well, one, there's some hardcore Arizonans, but in the recent years, you've had this influx of Californians. But a lot of the outdoorsmen Californians, they've been transitioning to that northern part of the state, or the ones that I've talked to, or even like if they're fishermen or they're retiring to that western part because the weather, one, it's super hot there, but you got good lakes and fishing access. A lot of them have just gone over the border because they still have family in California. Maybe they got grandkids or kids that are still there. You just hop, skip, and a jump over to Lake Havasu City or some of these other areas right around there, and Kingman and all that other jazz, and you can still have your ties there, but you get all the tax benefits and the benefits of just less regulation. So there's been a lot of those people influx there, and if you look at the dynamics so far, it's heavily Kerry Lake in those areas. These people have just gone through the Newsom era and they've moved there. And then, of course, you got traditional Arizonans that have lived there for a long time. Same with Masters. You're talking about clean sweeps in these areas where Lake, Masters, and not only that, okay, that the last other thing on there, you got Yuma, which is military installation. You got a number of military areas there. And you do in Pima County as well. You have Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. In Maricopa, you got Luke Air Force Base. If you go over to the western part of the state, you have MCS Yuma there, which is becoming a little bit more. It's a great training ground for the Marine Corps and Army, and there's a bombing range and stuff. But anyway, the Marine Corps installation there, which I believe when I was in, they were moving a lot of the Miramar stuff trying to into Yuma just because of how more militarily friendly they are there than in other places. So that's going to be heavily conservative area. We're almost at 20 minutes. So that's a pretty good rundown to Arizona. I hope Lake pulls this out. I hope Masters. More than likely, Lake might pull this out and become Arizona governor, hopefully, because I think that will be a turning point for Arizona in general, back towards its traditional conservative values. Now, I don't know what Masters will be able to pull this one off. It looks like it's not looking too good for him. I can't say one way or the other. On the House front there, like I said, very conservative. It looks like we'll pull out at least 4 seats in Arizona with a possibility of getting one in District 1. We'll see. Anyway, that's my breakdown of update on Arizona. I'll probably do one here on another state here in just a second, but I'll talk to you later. We'll upload this one.